cities like Los Angeles, for example, that could translate to saving 1 to 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide annually.
50% of the trees that you plant on 1 year completely killed. We don't have any more biodiversity, any more nature. This has an impact on the mental health of the children.
My favorite part of the podcast episode, quantifying the impact. You would require planting 5 to 6 billion trees globally, 2 to 3 times the size of Germany. Are you ready for it?
Already ready.
Okay.
Let's do it.
You're listening to Climate Conversations with Divya, brought to you by Purple Fix Productions. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Climate Conversations with Divya. I'm your host, and today we're talking about something we all interact with but don't think about enough: our cities. From the concrete jungles we navigate daily to neglected corners that could transform into vibrant green spaces, how do we make our cities greener, smarter, and better for both people and the planet? To help us dive into this, I'm thrilled to welcome Baptiste Laurent. Hi, Baptiste.
Hi.
Baptiste is the co-founder and CEO of Vertuo. Vertuo is redefining urban spaces with its innovative water autonomous systems that's making green cities not just possible, but practical. Baptiste, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's start with you. What's your story? What inspired you to co-found Vertuo?
Yeah, well, 5 years ago, I was really concerned by the evolution of cities and of buildings. And what I really figured out, it was when you see all this world evolving, when you see a construction site, when you see the building site in the cities, we still use the same materials as 100 years ago. We still do the same things. So I wanted to dive into this problem to understand how we can accelerate the transition of cities and territories with the new challenge that struggled all citizens of the world.
And is that the same core vision that you hold behind Vertuo? Like, what is the problem you're solving and why does it matter?
Yeah, the core vision is we brought it with Elodie, my co-founder, in cities. We need to develop vegetation and nature because we need nature to fight against heat islands and increasing of temperatures in all the temperate areas of the globe. On the other hand, we know that water is a challenge because water scarcity. We have lots of floodings in some areas of the world, but also we have less and less rain in other parts. So there is a huge dilemma here. We need to increase vegetation, but on the other hand, we have less and less water. So we know vegetation to be powerful has to be dependent of a water source. So that was really our vision behind this. We have to find a solution to help urban areas to get more vegetation, more nature without any dependence of a water network.
Wow, that is super impressed. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, before we get into more details, I want the audience to know a little bit more about you. What is something that you can tell me that others would be surprised to know about Baptiste?
Surprising about Baptiste. I'm only 40 and 40 years old, and I already have four kids. So everybody's telling me that I'm also an entrepreneur in the personal life, and because I like to deal with the two types of the problems, little kids and also huge problems in professional life. So maybe this is surprising. I don't know.
It's definitely interesting. To be fair, if you come from one of the Asian countries, it wouldn't be that surprising.
Yeah.
Personally, for example, my parents are super young for the age they are, for their age to be having a kid as old as I am. And how about, let's say, adventure hobbies or something? Maybe something in that direction?
Well, I'm still practicing rugby every week. This is really important for me. I really find values that I like in the professional life, also in the sports of rugby, because there is the spirit of team. There is the spirit together one times, all the team together, and to spend really good times, and to help to raise someone who could be in trouble, and also to build and to maintain this happiness all together. So I really like this sport for that, because I find lots of comparison between life and sports.
That is so poignant. But also at the same time, I'm hoping for the sake of your kids that you don't play the Irish version of rugby, because that is devastating in all its manner. I think I saw it once and I was scared and chilled to the bone.
That's still better to play American football.
Is that even a game? I mean, how is that so huge? It's crazy. Let's talk about the bigger picture here then. Urban greening sounds great, but why is it such a challenge? What exactly is stopping cities from turning into lush green paradises?
Lots of problems, and it depends on the zone of the globe. But the major problem, we built lots of cities during the last centuries without thinking about nature. So we put a lot of network under the floor. We created like big holes for buildings and stuff, and finally we weren't thinking that it could have an impact on biodiversity and the global picture of nature, because when you dig some huge gap in the floor to build a building, then you have huge impacts on biodiversity, because you don't have the water that floods in the soil. You create some barriers for some types of species, and finally it's difficult to maintain a growing nature in that type of context. Another another struggle about hygiene, cleaning spirit of cities, because during lots of centuries we were frightened in cities to get some viruses or bacteria. All the builders of the conceptors of the cities wanted to clean everything, so we wanted to erase finally life from city, biodiversity and nature. Want to erase that to avoid any virus development. So that was also a struggle that finally today we pay the consequences.
It seems to be such a multi-layered conversation, and not just problems of impermeable soils like you mentioned, and water scarcity that's leading up to that, competing land use, and I'm imagining budget constraints as well are really big factors here. So I'm wondering what happens when we don't act. What are the environmental and societal impacts of leaving urban spaces underutilized?
Yeah, the major problem we could consider nowadays. So the first one, when we don't have any more biodiversity, any more nature, the first one is you could see major impacts on human life, because we have the quality of air that is decreasing. We have the health of people that are also decreasing. That there are many like studies that have been made by International Association of Health. In some cities with a larger surface of greening, we have less disease that are created. So this is very impressive. Also, you have impacts on, of course, the refreshness of the cities between summer and the winters. So I don't know if you have heard about the summer heat wave in cities. You have lots of materials everywhere that have a big inertia. So when the sun is going through these materials, just like metals, just like concrete, all these are containing the heat.
Sure.
And finally, the temperature of the city is always increasing, and finally, it's not livable for human beings. So this is really a degrading system. If you have to fight against all this problem with nature at one point.
I had a guest recently from Milan, and she was just mentioning how Milan becomes a heat island. It's a concrete heat island in the summers, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But I would be very interested to know is you mentioned a lot about diseases, and I'm sure it would be very interesting for the listeners as well to understand the relation between urban greening and reducing the diseases that you've talked?
Yeah, some studies that mention groups of children living in a city only with, artificial materials, and also the children that are living close to nature will really, this has an impact on the mental health of the children. All the disease you could have with lungs and air disease you have in
So
cities.
cardiovascular and respiratory diseases and also asthma. So you're talking about asthma. That actually makes a lot of sense. Urban trees in London have been shown to remove close to 2,000 tons of pollutants annually.
Exactly.
And that to me is I love these kinds of studies, especially because I think when I was doing my research before we did this podcast, I looked into a study in Barcelona as well that found that neighborhoods with more trees had a 40% lower risk of heart-related diseases or illnesses during summer months. And I think that's the cooling effect that works at play here to help with cardiovascular situations. And I love that you mentioned mental health as well, because I understand greenery has been associated with alleviating symptoms of ADHD, particularly within children. So a very important, and I think there are quite a few studies from Singapore where vector-borne diseases, and when I say vector-borne diseases, it means mosquito-borne diseases like malaria and the West Nile virus, for example. It reduces the breeding grounds that they have for disease-carrying mosquitoes that lowers dengue cases in the urban areas. So definitely, it's an unseen effect that you don't think about. Like, first time you think about urban greening, you don't actually relate it with public health and public health systems and chronic disease prevention as well, because I think there was one UK study that found that individuals living within 300 meters of green spaces were 36% or something like that, like 35% less likely to develop obesity-related conditions. So I think just all this cancer risks and obesity, and especially when I think about cities like Delhi.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart because a friend of mine actually had to move his grandmother to a different city because she was living in Delhi for her safety. So, no, I'm very happy that you mentioned that. And I'm also happy that Vertuo has identified this particular gap and you've sort of gone into it. I really want to know, how did you approach this challenge differently?
So, well, we started from, we know we have to keep growing nature surfaces in all the cities of the world. So it's really a common goal we have to develop all together. And finally, after we just analyzed that it was not going so fast and it was not so easy to develop, dive into the limitation. So we asked some city managers, some technical services to just understand, well, because all the studies, the impact on the health, the impact on about the heat, why aren't you planting like thousands of trees during 1 or 2 years in a city? Why aren't you investing in one time all the budget in developing green? And finally, what we could find is like nowadays it's not easy because you have lots of loss. There is a study that has been made in Chicago that show that finally, even if you plant like lots of trees in many cities, because of the stress you have for nature and city, because of the pollution, because of the rains, of the droughts also, you have more than 50% of the trees that you plant on 1 year that are completely killed the year after. So this is a big problem because nowadays it's not only pushing a button to plant and to create greening space. Yeah. You really have to work on the soil, and this is something that isn't understandable by the startup citizens, because citizens just think you have to dive a gap and to put a tree and that's it. But that's really more complex than that. So that was finally, we just came from the problem of why we don't have so many trees in cities, and we just go under to understand, okay, it's because we have a soil problem in cities, so we have to work on the soil. So what are the problems of the soil? First, we have this diversity about water. Sometimes we have too much water, and other times we have droughts. And in other places of the world, we have really bad quality of soils, and we don't have any more soil biodiversity in cities. Worms, insects. We don't have any more this stuff. And we also know by many agronomic studies that the tree to become like very powerful and like beautiful and to create all his impacts for the human, he has to also have this local biodiversity, this underfloor biodiversity. And that's why finally we work with Vertuo to create this ecosystem that create many positive impacts for everyone.
And congratulations really on creating Vertuo.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super happy that we're the alumni of the same school.
Yeah.
So that's super
also,
cool.
Let's
get into the magic of Vertuo a little bit. How exactly do your systems work? To explain to the audience a little bit, I hear terms like rainwater harvesting and zero external watering needs, or changing, like you mentioned, changing the quality of soil. Would you be able to walk us through it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, the goal so finally was to create the perfect soil for cities. So starting point was my associate Elodie, who is a designer, and she's doing lots of bio inspiration. So it's a little bit I don't know if your audience know. The idea is to start from nature, to observe nature, and to understand how nature finally can give us some answers to adapt to human life. So the goal is really to reproduce the nature behavior in artificial way of life. And Elodie started to analyze where the soil were really like autonomous in not in cities but everywhere, where the soil are really autonomous and really fertile with lots of positive impacts and without any help of the human. And finally, she found that there is a landscape definition that is called hedgerows. The hedgerows are like separating different fields. That's a type of tree that are following each other, and they're really separating agricultural fields. And she found that this type of hedgerows were really, really positive in terms of biodiversity, really positive in terms of complexity of the plants, because we have lots of different size of trees. We have lots of different species. We have a big density in one space. And we also have a really important capacity of permeability in that type of system. And also, it's not like a forest, because we know that the climax in the world is a forest, but we cannot reproduce forest everywhere in cities. It also, the positive impact, it's short, it's like constraint in terms of size and surface. And she began to really observe that, and she began to prototype to understand how the all the ecosystem was working. And finally, she created a prefabricated system that we call a bocage in Vertuo, and this system reproduces the landscape of the hedgerow in the city. So the idea of this system is an association of three parts. We have first an artificial phreatic table. So we have a kind of water collector. We collect rainwater during winters and autumn in cities. So the particularity of our system is we work in cities where we have like more than 300 millimeters of rain every year. So we are not adapted to cities with less than that type of rain, because we work mainly with rain. Also, our second part of solution is filtration. So we filtrate hydrocarbons and standard urban pollutants. So the idea is, yes, we can collect rainwater, but after we have to clean it to improve the capacity of plants to really eat the right nutrients. And finally, we have the substrate, so a particular substrate that is thought to really be with a huge density of biodiversity inside the soil, with mushrooms, with lots of bacteria density. And finally, associating these three parts, we succeed to create a really imperfect soil for cities. And nowadays, we install more than 100 places in France, and we really measure a huge impact. So we have like hedgerow growing more than 3 meters high, and with no maintenance, no artificial watering. It's really autonomous completely, and it's really powerful in terms of aesthetic and impact.
Wow, that's super impressive, and might I say that's a little bit genius as well. I love that you gave us a real life example as well of deployment. Maybe could you give us a specific deployment example where Vertuo has made a measurable impact, apart from the fact that you mentioned that the hedgerows have gone up to 3 meters. And I love the parallel because it's similar to what they do in agricultural fields as well, where they try to rotate crops and have different rows of crops in order to maintain the soil biodiversity, as you put it. So the same nutrients are not used up by all the crops. But if you had any use case, I know you mentioned, I think the last time we met, you mentioned how the temperatures were decreasing.
Yeah, I can speak about, like, we have the more ancient streets we made are near Paris. So we made several streets there. The well-known street is inside the Olympic village during the Olympics of Paris 2024.
Wow.
We had one road with our system, and we also have a road about like 100 meters long, just in the north of Paris. And this road has been built since 2020, and this is one of the typical example we like to show to all cities, because first we started from a classic road. So the idea is we have a two-way road with one border that we created with our system. So all the rain that are falling in this road, we are collecting this rain. We are storing this rain in our system. We completely filtrate the rain that are coming from this road, so we don't have any more rain that are going to the like the public network, the pipes or other stuff. We filtrate this rainwater, and after we irrigate a hedgerow that is like more than 3 meters high, and after we filtrate the water in some trees spaces, so we have like trees high 10 meters high, I think. And finally, this create a complete ecosystem, a positive ecosystem, because we measure during summers a difference of temperature between the streets, our hedgerows, and also a planted park just have just in the back. And this is really impressive because the park is planted like classically, so we have natural soil in the floor, and it's really different from our hedgerow, because when we measure the difference during a high temperature during an afternoon in summer, we have 12 degrees of difference between the temperature in the park and the temperature at the hedgerow. 12 degrees Celsius. So this is really, really important. Of course, it's not the temperature you feel when you are human beings, but that's the temperature on the plants. That means that the plants in our system are not suffering. They really live like easily all the year, and they are not suffering from heat. So this is really a great example we like to show, and also the impact is huge for the city management, because first, they never came there since 2020 to irrigate, to water. Never. So this plantation has never consumed drinking water. The economy about maintenance is huge. It's about 80% of economy compared to a started plantation system you could have in city. They develop freshness, they reduce their costs, and they completely cut the drinkable water consumption. So that's really positive at different points.
Wow, that's such an achievement. Congratulations, honestly.
Yeah, we work a lot for that to really replicate the type of model all over the world. Yeah.
Well, I imagine scaling is always a challenge. What does it take to scale solutions like yours across cities with different climates and infrastructures, would you say?
Yeah, of course. That's one of our challenge nowadays, because we know we have an industrial solution that works in temperate zones of the globe. So after we know that it's an EV product, so it's not just like an application and you just copy in a different language and that works. So this is one of our current limitation, because we have to find some local partners that are able to build our system and to replicate. So the blocks we are creating can work all over the world. If you really consider the temperate areas of the globe, it works. The difference we have to put is the filtration and the substrate. That is, they are different. The filtration is different because the quality of the rainwater we could collect should be different, like considering the quality of the automation and the different reject we could collect from streets. The substrate has to be different also, because substrate depend on climate, so temperature, hygrometry, stuff like this, and also of course the plant. The plants are also different because we work mainly with endemic plants, so plantation that historically live in the same place.
In the indigenous species, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's super. That's a great approach, I think. I really want to move to my favorite part of the podcast episode. And for me, that is quantifying the impact. And then together we will play a game about myth busting, whether it's a myth or controversy, right? Does that sound good to you? The structure in the sense?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to sort of sit down here together with you and try to quantify the impact in order to let people know why they should really care, right? Like we've mentioned the qualitative benefits, we've mentioned about the cooling effect, and we've mentioned about the better life, aesthetic benefits, about the reduction of diseases. But let's get into numbers. Baptiste, what's the measurable impact of urban greening on emissions and cities' livability for you? And don't worry, this is not something that you have to come up with. It's totally an exchange. We can do it together. I can also give out some numbers, and you can tell me if it makes sense to you.
Yeah. So you mean the impact on qualitative nature in cities compared to a city with no nature, right?
We've discussed the qualitative impact. And so, for example, for me, right, overall, I like to measure everything in terms of the net zero 2050 goals and the 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions that we need to reduce annually in order to reach there. And how much is any solution that we're talking about at the podcast here, what percentage can that solution impact that overall? And just to be able to move globally people in order to, like, this is making a difference, and we're able to sit down here and quantify it. So let me start you off a little bit here. So for example, for me, trees, quickly when you think trees, you think carbon dioxide sequestration, right? So carbon dioxide equivalent sequestration from urban greening, for example. And a mature tree is known to sequester around 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide annually. And this is from a USDA Forest Service report. And I think the World Research Institute or Resources Institute, I think it's the World Resources Institute that says that high-performing species in urban areas can absorb close to 150 to 200 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So that means that small urban green areas, so about 1 hectare of a green urban area, will be able to absorb 10 to 20 tons of carbon dioxide annually. Now, if we want to scale for impact, that means a medium-sized city where a population is about like 1 million people with even like 10% additional urban greening could absorb 0.5 to 1 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. So for that city particularly, it would be 1% of the city's emissions, which is meaningful in every way possible. But if we did have to go a little bit further and think about global impacts and what that means, like how much greening is needed. So let's say we want to offset 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, right? So which is 2%, closer to 2% of global emissions. What would we require to get there? And from all the numbers that I've mentioned so far, if you sit down and calculate, you would require planting 5 to 6 billion trees globally based on the 150 to 200 kilogram carbon dioxide absorbing species. And alternatively, that could mean that 50 to 100 million hectares of urban greening spaces need to be like they're necessary. So to help you imagine that, I think that would be 2 to 3 times the size of Germany, that we need to create an urban greening program that covers 2 to 3 times the size of Germany to put off 2% of total emissions out of the atmosphere. What does this mean for you? Does this mean anything for you?
No, that's really smart, and I would like to speak like that with my like customers and cities manager, because really take the problem with a bird eye. And that's really great, because that's the deal. You mentioned the carbon sequestration, and it's really important. You also have 2 impacts. The first impact I read is, when you have a fertile soil, a qualitative soil with lots of biodiversity inside, you still create a sequestration that is 10 times better than a poor you could have in a city. Because the problem of a tree nowadays, when you just go out in your city and you're just seeing some trees, there is nothing, no life, just under the floor. And this is really important, because you could have a different sequestration between started system and between improved system. So this is also a point very important, because the idea is not to create vegetation everywhere, nature everywhere, because we know we still are in cities and we still have to get some roads for people and trucks and everything. But the idea is every square meter we reverse to nature, we should be really, really improved, really fertile, really dense, with lots of species, because this has an impact on carbon finally.
That's so true. That is so true. And additionally, when we're talking about side impacts and the cooling effect, I think it's very important to also note that besides the 2% that we can reduce annually for the global emissions, the cooling effect that it will have on the surrounding areas. We don't use a lot of air conditioners here in Paris, but for cities like Los Angeles, for example, that could translate to saving 1 to 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, when you think that cooling effect can reduce energy demand for air conditioning by 10 to 15%. It's cutting emissions further. So it's a huge impact for countries and cities where they're very highly dependent on cooling infrastructure to manage the temperatures in the city. So it's very important to state, but I think I'm not saying it's a disclaimer or anything, but it's important to note that no solution works on its own. And of course, urban greening is a very important aspect, but it's also most impactful when you're pairing it with other solutions, such as renewable energy, circular economy measures, and energy efficiency overall. But no, I think it's an important facet to think about as well. What also makes me happy is EU regulations. Generally, like, I'm super proud. For example, I think it's called the EU Urban Greening Platform, that requires cities to meet 30% of tree canopy coverage and increase green infrastructure by 2030. So does that kind of regulation mean anything to you in terms of the partnerships you're able to form moving forward?
Yeah, of course. Nowadays, one really important point, as you just said, is nowadays it's generally known by everyone that there is an impact between the green canopy and the carbon finally, and the freshness, of course. And what I'm really happy with, it's we nowadays we work with all politics, all politics sides. I mean, we for in France, city managers are really separated dependently of their politics parties. And nowadays we see that we could really work with all parties, and they all are really aware. The difference, of course, of the projects they're dealing, and the way they're taking the projects are really different. But finally, they all have in their roadmap greening solutions and greening ambitions. So I think that's one important point nowadays. The only frustration, it's not going so fast, but yes, of course.
Yeah. What I think would be very interesting at this point of time in the podcast episode is to switch to the game where we're going to bust some myths and sort of call out some controversies. Are you ready for it?
Already ready.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So this is Fact or Fiction Urban Greening Edition. Ready? So how about the first one? So urban greening is too expensive and resource intensive for cities. Fact or fiction? And feel free to drop some knowledge to support whether fact, fiction, myth, controversy.
Yeah, so it really depends how you take the problem. This is one of the myths, of course. When we really take the problem technically, of course, if you take 1 square meter of road and 1 square meter of a completely luxuriant greening system in cities, of course, the greening system is always more expensive because we have to maintain it. It's alive. So when you take some artificial space and some livable space, it always have a cost. But when you take the big picture, finally, it's less costly because you have positive impacts about your life. You have positive impacts about the costs of the district also. This is really important for people who don't really care. About the environmental transition, about water resource or heat. We have this argument to say that there is a correlation between nature and the price of your flat where you live. And this is amazing because I saw a study that was made in New York, and when in New York, when you have a park and at less than 500 meters from your flat, you can appreciate the price of the final flat. So this is really impressive because it has also an impact for people that are not regarding the environmental impacts. So finally, it's more a value you bring in cities than more a constraint. And if you see really the global image, so finally you understand the impact on the freshness, the impact on biodiversity, the impact on attractiveness, the impact on the quality of life, and the impact on the value of the city and of your house or the flat. Finally, it's all positive. So the maintenance you have to put on the greening system that is really low has many diverse impacts. So it's not just a one-way solution. You just have to pay for one consequence.
I love the way you see it. It's and I have this problem of comparing it to the gym systems a lot, but it's like saying a gym membership is expensive, but you save on health costs later. Green spaces seem to work in the same way. They're an investment and not a splurge. So it should be on people's New Year resolutions, don't you think? For many people, for the New Year's, they're going to be gym memberships. And I think for city officials, it should be getting a partnership with Vertuo, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know.
And also, I'm always dreaming that we could have a partnership with social insurance, health insurance, because there is a link. So finally, I think we should have also an investment from this type of insurance in cities. In France, we have the National Association for Health. It is really unique, Sécurité Sociale, and this like collects money from all the people working in France, and they have after they have a huge amount of money they use to pay hospital and invest for human care. And I think progressively they should go out from this type of investment, and also to invest in that type of a solution, because it also has impact, and just should be a really great partnership also.
It's such a unique way to actually approach this. So for a time being, I was working in a few impact investment projects, and I do know that a lot of and I've forgotten the English word now, but the mutual, what is mutual in English?
Yeah, I don't know.
There should be a word.
Like health insurance?
Health insurance. Yeah. You already said it. Sorry. I don't know. Sometimes I think just traversing between 5 languages in my head just makes me crazy. I forget which word belongs to which language. But so basically health insurance systems, for example, invest completely. So there was a startup that was working on sort of rehabilitating people who are recovering from cancer. Their what is chiffre d'affaires? Revenue. Their
turnover.
revenue.
Yeah, okay.
It's happening again. Their revenue was completely paid for by the different health insurance schemes that exist in France. And I think it's just such a unique way, and it points to a country's health insurance systems and the strength of it, that you're not only investing in sort of helping people recover after they need services from a hospital, but you're doing precautionary investments that they don't get sick that often. What, according to me, would help you in this matter is sort of getting a few case studies, but also doing some on-ground research on proving actual impact. So studies from other people, but also doing your own studies in the places where you've made a difference. I think that could really help you advance those talks, those partnerships, based on very little experience that I've had working on such projects.
Yeah, that's true. And this is one thing that is really interesting about nature. Mm-hmm. Finally you could find lots of investors, because finally it has impacts on everything. Mm-hmm. Because as I said, it says like, so you just mentioned the health insurance. So of course you have impact on health. So health insurance should have a participation about that. You also have like the urban development of the city, because you know that when you have like a percentage of nature, your district is more attractivable, and you have impact on the attractiveness, so more people coming and more people paying fees just in the district. You also have the water companies, like in cities that manage the water system. So finally you have a system planting areas that are really improved for water. They reduce the consumption of water, so they should also have an interest about that. Finally, when you see that everybody is touched by that, you don't have only one type of population that is concerned by.
That is so true. I was going to ask a second myth / sort of fact fiction question, but I think you've answered it. It was going to be urban greening is a nice to have, not a critical climate solution. But I think we've covered almost all aspects of it during the conversation, because it's definitely very essential for climate adaptation, mitigating floods, if you think about it, reducing emissions, and improving air quality and diseases. So sort of tying it to urban resilience goals is very important here. And no, I've loved the chat so far. If we were to offer certain global context, how does Virtuo's approach align with global efforts? Because as I understand it, like, for example, there are, let me clarify the question a little bit more for you. So there are other startups in the space, right? Like Germany has Green City Solutions, for example. Sweden, if I'm not mistaken, has Plantagon. that does vertical farming and greening infrastructure for cities. And Green City Solution is again city tree, air filtering green installations in urban centers. So there are different global efforts. Do you see yourself partnering with these startups in these spaces, or is it more of a competitive landscape? Is there a feeling of working together, maybe joining hands at some point and sort of making an impact? What does the equation look like here?
Yeah, I think like what I really happy about it, I see many people like me working on this problems, like asking themselves how they could improve quality of life in cities, how they could improve the biodiversity, nature. So I'm really happy with that. I don't think like we are in red competitive market, because the idea nowadays, like, all the startups just like me, they're not mature, and nobody has like the perfect solution. And I think all the entrepreneur I meet, no one is just like saying I have the perfect solution for all over the world, and that's it, and I want to destroy all over, because we're we are like in a market that is not just like developing so easily, just like doing a comparison, but we're not like for example, we don't have like a leader that has one solution that could replicate in all countries, in all cities in few months. What is interesting nowadays, it's we are many people digging for the solution that could spread very easily, and I like this period about that. And what my only regret is, like, I think we don't exchange enough together, because like we don't know each other. They are like event, and just like Change Now. I don't know if you know that, but it's an event that was created a few years ago, and that happens every year in Paris. And that type of event, like Change Now
Change Now. Oh
event.
yeah, I do know about Change
Now.
Now. Okay, wow, that's super.
And it gathered lots of startup about environment, and that type of days is really impressive, because you all gather during 3 days, and we make lots of connection, and finally we just see that we could improve all ourselves, all our solutions. So that's really powerful and positive.
Well, no, definitely very powerful and positive. And if I hope the CEOs of Green City Solutions and Plantagon are listening, so please reach out to Baptiste Laurent.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys can form like a trinity of urban solutions here. It's a strong, I think Europe is going to have a stronghold, especially given that there's a huge market in Africa. If you think about it, the African government has they have something called, if I'm not mistaken, it's called Great Green Wall Initiative that they have, which is try to urban greening a little bit to restore land and mitigate climate impacts in African cities. So that could be very interesting to you. But other than that, if you had any last words or to sort of address, I don't know, the listeners or maybe investors in general, what would that be? And if you also had to touch up a little bit upon any exciting projects or new innovations that are in the horizon, what's next for Vertuo? Any final things about your vision?
Yeah, first, I will say my first message is I would like as many people to be really concerned and interested by nature, and to understand how nature is working, because finally it's really, really complex. And we really, I will be happy if like everyone that listened to your podcast just tell himself after, I want to understand how a tree works. And to understand why it's important to how a soil is created, and how we develop fertility in the soil. And because finally, if everyone in the city, when they just go out, they just think, yeah, okay, I understand how nature works. Finally, I think we all are going to take the good decisions. So we will have to bring knowledge to everyone about that.
In that case, the listeners should definitely listen to episode 3, which was actually on biodiversity. And we covered this topic, which reminds me, actually, I think maybe it would be very interesting for Vertuo to partner up with, so my guest was from 3Bs, and 3Bs has created a platform that measures in real time biodiversity in a given location. And sort of it has multiple, it has temperature grids, etc., over a time period. So it was originally built to help companies do better in their biodiversity CSRD reporting. So the directive reporting that EU has made mandatory for a certain group of companies, and moving on, it would be mandatory from 2028 for other companies as well. So I think it could be an interesting conversation between you and 3Bs. What do you think?
Yeah.
I will make
Great pleasure. Yeah.
I will make the introduction if you want.
Yeah, I would like to.
Super, that will be official. Do you have any questions for me? You can turn the tables, and like you can ask me any questions you want.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So first, so I should have asked the question at the beginning of the podcast, but I don't know how are you concerned by it, like the nature spreading in different cities. So did I manage to convince you that it's important to focus on the soil and to really consider that particular aspect of the city's construction because finally it has lots of impacts on all of lives and the lives of our children. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah. To give you a little bit of a background on which can sort of shed light on what I feel about this, I actually grew up in an ecological reserve with 48 leopards, 300 plus sloth bears, and a lot of forests around me.
Wow.
So
You're lucky.
For the majority part of my life, I didn't see concrete buildings. In fact, my town is so small, it doesn't even have a movie theater. And I'm very happy about it. Very few distractions in the town.
Yeah.
I think over the years, so where I grew up has a specific season for rainy season. You have the monsoons. And my town, it's on the top of a hill station. So you wouldn't be able to see the sun for 3 months at a time because it was raining so heavily. And that was the beauty of living in the town as well. But as the years progressed, the monsoon season from 3 months turned to 1.5 and almost 1 month now. And it is so very evident right away. So that is one aspect of it. Amount of birds, the variety of birds you're able to hear in the morning, that has also changed.
Wow.
And eventually, I think even some places, like people that have gardens in their houses, they remove the garden, they build out like a marble floor for the sake of it. So even those things as a child used to have a huge impact on me. Like it used to break my heart if any tree was cut down, if anything of nature. I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not saying that I'm a tree hugger. People, as soon as you say, I grew up in an ecological reserve, they think I'm going to go protest, do a gilet jaune.
Yeah.
But that's not the case at all. It impacts how the kind of air you breathe, the kind of, as soon as you move to cities, the kind of like breathing issues you start to have, you feel that. So the kind of impact that has really changes the way you think about things. So of course, I think urban greening is very important part of the fight against climate change. But Baptiste, thank you for sharing your story and showing us how green innovation isn't just about plants, it's about people, cities, and the planet. To everyone listening, if today's episode made you rethink your city's potential, share it with your community. Let's keep pushing for smarter, greener solutions together. I'm your host, and this is Climate Conversations with Divya. Until next time, stay curious and stay green. How do you feel?
Good.
Was it everything you hoped it was going to be in terms of a conversation?
No, that was fine. I didn't have like really many like ideas, but finally you turn it so that it could like be a normal conversation. That was really good for that.
No, of course, the idea is never to put you on spot. It's always to sort of have a conversation. I myself as a host, like I'm trying to learn more about what you have to share with me. So I try to listen more than I talk, at least I try. I'm not sure if I'm able to carry that out. But places where I can add value to the conversation, I like not to hesitate to be able to do that, because we both here, we care a lot about the subject. It's very important. You just heard Climate Conversations with Divya, brought to you by Purple Fix Productions. We hope today's episode sparked new ideas and deeper curiosity about how we can tackle climate change together. Until next time, this is Climate Conversations with Divya. Stay curious, stay engaged, and let's shape a sustainable future together.